So this is now the second directorial feature film from James Samuel. He just most recently did The Harder They Fall for Netflix, came out a couple of years ago. He's also a longtime collaborator of Jay-Z. Jay-Z is a producer on this movie, and they've worked a lot together. He did a short film and a couple of music videos for Jay-Z, if I'm not mistaken. So they're very much a collaborative partnership that is looking to really break into Hollywood and do a lot of big things. And this is also now the second time that James Samuel has decided to do something historical. He's decided to place black characters and black figures in a historical context and time period, largely, I think, to showcase just the fact that, once, black people have been around, they have existed in all of these different times in history. But largely in Hollywood history, we've not seen ourselves represented in these particular ways. We've not necessarily seen a ton of black cowboys, especially with an entirely black cast. And now the same thing with a biblical epic, a comedy drama. There's tons of biblical films that have been made throughout the course of history, especially satirical films, Monty Python, things of that nature. But this is kind of really the first big budget movie, I think, that's being made with a predominantly black cast, black filmmakers behind it, that's taking place in a biblical historical context. And so we checked this movie out a couple of weeks ago. With all of that out the way, man, I will pass it over to you. What did you think about James Samuel's new film, The Book of Clarence?
Well, wow. This is a movie. No, I'm just kidding. My problem with this film is I don't know if it's supposed to be a satire or a sermon. And that idea is too hard to navigate to me, in which this film existed. This film existed in a plane where I simply didn't know what it was trying to say. And because of that, it took away from pretty much for me almost every aspect of the film that I probably would have found interesting had that been made more clear to me. I'll start with the positive. There are a decent amount of times I like the way this was shot. In fact, actually, to be honest, I think the shell of the movie. I like the overall encasing of these black people existing in these biblical times. I like the idea of let's not necessarily reshape history, which is the word, but reimagine it. Let's get us, like you said, to understand that black people existed in this time, and let's have them have a story. But because this film does decide to tackle Christianity in those times and Romans and all of those things, I felt like the message needed to be a little bit more, clear and a little more see-through, so all of those other aspects could come to life. I loved the way the movie was shot. I think, James Samuels, I really like the way The Harder They Fall looked. And I think a lot of that movie works, but it's also because the story works there more than this film works. And I think, what's interesting about The Book of Clarence, I think we'll be talking about this movie for a very long time. I think it will be and is controversial in that way, but to put it quite simply, it just did not work for me. Usually I was actually excited here in the book of Clarence in the middle of the movie. There's always moments where I'm like, okay, I think I'm about to finally like this, and then I don't. Something happens to where they take away from the moment, or maybe something was too long, or something was too preachy, something was too Twitter fingery. It just kept happening over and over. And in fact, they include James McAvoy in this movie. He's supposed to be like a Roman, I don't know what to call him, general or something. And he does tremendous. Like the acting, in fact, the last half of the movie, the acting turns up. I'm not sure what happened. It's like they clicked a switch and everyone decided to start acting for real. I don't know what that was about, because it was not like that in the first half of the movie. But that switch turns, and it's almost like the director wants you to feel different, but I didn't, because the rest of the movie just fell so flat. It was like, okay, but why are we getting serious now? We weren't serious before. And they try to make that distinguish, and they try to make you see what the main character is trying to see, and it just simply does not work for me. And so, yeah, that's really it, man. I think overall, it seemed like a comedy, but it wasn't very funny because there were so many moments it was trying to be serious. And it was just too convoluted, I think, for me. It didn't do a good job of teetering that line that we see in some other movies do so well. A lot of movies are good at being both satire and serious, but unfortunately The Book of Clarence wasn't it for me.
I really couldn't agree more. I found The Book of Clarence to be incredibly underwhelming, and I think overall this movie is attempting to do a lot of things. Some of it is satirical, some of it's comedy. There's romance there. There's obviously the biblical implications, the ideas and themes of Christianity, and also the fact that this movie runs parallel with the story and the life of Jesus Christ. Very interesting premise. Got me super excited about this movie,
Yep.
but I don't think it does any of those things particularly well. The tone was just simply all over the place, and it often left me as an audience member really confused on how to feel. Is it supposed to be just a pure comedic satire, or are we trying to deconstruct our thoughts and ideas about religion and Christianity? Are we
Mm-hmm.
trying to really reimagine what this story could have been back during those particular times? And perhaps it wants to do both of those things, which is fine. Movies can often have multiple questions that it raises and different targets that it's trying to hit. But the final delivery of all of those different elements was just really lackluster to me, and almost none of the acting performances were standouts here, which is quite startling because this cast really feels underutilized, which I just would not have called coming into this movie, because you have somebody like Alfre Woodard, who's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen what Tiana Taylor is capable
Mm-hmm.
of with 1001, and she was severely underutilized. Even David Oyelowo, incredibly talented actor, really doesn't have a ton to do here. The only one that stands out who's not forgettable for me is Benedict Cumberbatch, who by the time he gets to this movie and really has a presence, he fucking steals every scene that he's in. But to your point, he comes in too little too late at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
movie when I've already made up my mind that this is a really disappointing film experience for me. And so I loved him in it. I really want to see that version of the movie. And that might be problematic to say because he's just like another white guy that, kind of pretends to be Jesus. But damn it, he was really funny and his scenes were great. And I just wondered, where was the rest of that energy and where was the rest of that tone
Mm-hmm.
throughout the remainder of this movie? And it just largely wasn't there. And even though he's a comedic relief and he provides a much needed, I think, jolt of energy by that point, it just didn't do enough for me to make me really come around to the movie. And so I left out of it really, really disappointed. I'm still in on James Samuel because I did like The Harder They Fall. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
he's a tremendous talent and has great ideas. I love just the way that he thinks. I love what he's trying to do here. And I love what he's trying to achieve from a pure creative and imaginative standpoint, and really trying to put Black people in places that we've often not seen ourselves. I love that idea. If he makes like 5 more of these types of movies in different historical periods, I'm
I
here
love it.
for it. If that's the
Yep.
lane, great, wonderful. He's like the Black Quentin Tarantino at that point. But you got to get the story and the writing and the themes and the tone a lot better. You got to get those things in shape for these films to be really, really successful. And so I do think that this movie is going to be somewhat divisive and to your point, controversial for a lot of people. And you might feel one way or another. You might have to just really see this film to really draw your own opinion about it, because it is going to elicit different emotional responses, especially because it is about religion. And that's often
Mm-hmm.
a divisive thing in and of itself. And so, folks, those are all of our thoughts on the Book of Clarence. If you've checked out this movie, hit us up and let us know what you think.